When you get to the end of Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, what greets you is this monster, Ahtal-Ka. Every intro cutscene in Generations follows the same formula of the monster striking some pose, a freeze frame, and the name sliding in at the bottom right. They're all super underwhelming, but this one for Ahtal-Ka feels even more limp than the rest. This is the first time you see what it looks like, and I don't think anyone expected a bug to be the last boss. One reason is that in the past, last bosses have included a walking volcano and a snake the size of a mountain. Now, the game wants me to believe this little mantis looking thing is on the same level as those? So the start of the game's final act gets off to a bit of a rocky start, and that is dangerous. A bad ending can have a huge impact on how people perceive a piece of media. There's this cognitive bias called the peak end rule, where people tend to judge a whole experience mostly by how they felt at the peak of intensity and at the end. I bet everyone can name a few examples where all the goodwill people had for something gets annihilated spectacularly thanks to a disastrous ending. And the unease that this might not be the great moment you were anticipating doesn't go away after the first few minutes of the fight either. It can obviously hit you pretty hard, and the shiny golden Egyptian vibe does make it look kinda cool, but it's not really got that oomph a last boss should have. Remember that before this you have to fight a dragon fused with a jet engine that can blast off so quickly that in a second it looks like a comet crossing the sky, only for it to smash back through the atmosphere straight into you. The last boss should be a step up from that, and at the moment, Ahtal-Ka just isn't reaching that mark. But then, something seems to change. You might have noticed the bits of machinery poking up through the sands that cover the arena. The monster suddenly ignores you and starts doing something with all this stuff, but you can't really see what. Then a gigantic frame rises from the sands, pulled from below by Ahtal-Ka's silk. Suddenly it flies into the middle of the construction, and now you're not fighting some lowly looking bug, you're fighting a bug piloting a mech. If you didn't know Monster Hunter was made in Japan, well, you definitely do now. In a single moment, it becomes clear that there's a lot more going on here than it first seemed, and by the end of the fight, all those worries of a wonky ending feel like a distant memory. In fact, when you weigh it all up, I really don't think there's ever going to be another final boss like Ahtal-Ka. So today, we're going to talk about why. There's always a lot of responsibility on the last boss of any game. They're the final note of an experience, so they need to put on a good show. If we think about the game Ahtal-Ka has to finish though, there's even more responsibility. Generations is a really interesting game. The name feels a bit like one of those generic subtitles you slap on a new entry to a long existing series, but for once it's actually appropriate. Over the years since the first release, Monster Hunter had been evolving with each new game. Some of these changes were major jumps, like the introduction of underwater combat, and some of them were refinements on the formula, like the removal of underwater combat. But even with all these changes, you can tell just by watching 5 minutes of gameplay there's a big difference between all the games that released before Monster Hunter World and those that came after it. Generations was the last game of the old style before World, so it literally places the line splitting the old style of games from the new, the generational split. You can easily mix the games on each side of the line, but you can't really mix across it. There's too many fundamental differences. When Monster Hunter Rise brought back 2 areas from the old generation, they had to completely redesign them, because of the new style's open world approach. So Generations was the last opportunity to easily mix all the games of the old style, and that's just what they did. Fan favourite areas and monsters were all combined into a single game, resulting in a huge variety of content to experience. It's a lot of fun, and moving everything almost as is lets you get a good look at how the design philosophy has changed over time. And the thing is, it gave the team the opportunity to look back at the series too. If you work on any project, I think it's always a good idea to occasionally pause and take stock of where you're at, and one of the funnest parts of that process is looking back at old ideas. You can see the developers doing a bit of this with Nakakos, the giant bony octopus monster. From art books we know that back in Monster Hunter 1 there was at some point going to be a 2-headed snake monster called the Crypt Hydra, which was covered in bandages and had this kind of undead vibe. For whatever reason the Crypt Hydra didn't make the cut. Maybe because making a 2-headed monster was too much for the team to manage. But working on Generations gave them the opportunity to look back on the idea and revisit it. The end result seems to be Nakakos, a two-headed monster wreathed in decay. Getting the Carcos working and into the game is a huge success, and is proof that the skills of the whole team have improved greatly in the interim between the first game and now. That success is a pretty good cause for celebration, and that's really what the whole game is, a celebration of the whole series up to this point. That includes how it's changed, but also why it's changed, and why it's been able to grow into such a phenomenon. So Ahtal-Ka doesn't just have the responsibility of being the last boss of a game, it has the responsibility of being the last boss of everything the series has built. It's literally concluding an entire generation of games. Sounds like a pretty big responsibility, right? Right off the bat, you can see some of the ways this mantle creeped into the design. Its primary colours are gold and purple, which can both be linked to royalty and prestige. There's also a bit of blue in there, and the way this blends with the gold looks like the patterning on some ancient Egyptian sarcophagi. The fact that it looks kinda Egyptian might even have been your first takeaway when seeing it for the first time. I think this was intentional, and originally it seems like it was going to be even more explicit. The art books say that early designs wanted Ahtal-Ka to look like a scarab beetle, a bug that shows up in all sorts of Egyptian art. The reason they want people to make this link seems pretty obvious. When you think of ancient Egypt, you think of grandeur and history. You might think the pyramids are a tourist trap now, but you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who doesn't find them impressive. For the conclusion of a game that's all about celebrating history and progress, priming players with thoughts about ancient Egypt is a no-brainer. But that still doesn't really explain why it's a bug. They could have just as easily put that Egyptian theme on another giant dragon, which would have carried those same implications and might even have looked more impressive. I mean, it pulls out a mech to compensate for its small size anyway. Why choose to start the fight by intentionally underwhelming the player? But this is where Ahtal-Ka distinguishes itself as something really special, and it starts by thinking about its real-life counterparts. Let's be real, nobody gives a shit about the lives of bugs. I think it's the massive size difference between them and us that fundamentally makes us treat them differently to other animals. I mean, if you don't look where you're going when walking through a forest, you might end up killing hundreds of bugs and not even realize it. If a bird flies into your apartment through an open window, you try and gently shoo it back out. If a fly comes in, you reach for the swatter. I'm not trying to make you feel bad for killing bugs, it's just to point out that we don't think of them the same way we do other animals. They're small and weak and therefore not a threat. Even the dangerous ones, like the venomous spiders of Down Under, are just not on the same level of perceived threat as something like a lion. So it's normal that in a world full of dragons twice the size of a house, a bug is just not going to seem like a powerful adversary. But let's take that thought and flip it for a minute. Those mansion-sized dragons routinely get their asses handed to them by a human a fraction of their size. Just like a bug is so small that we don't see it as a threat, surely they would look at a human's puny size and think the same. And yet the hunters bring them down nonetheless. Now, obviously this is a video game we're discussing, so that's not really surprising. But in the logic of this world, nobody should expect that a single guy would be able to defeat something 10 times his size. When we look at Ahtal-Ka from our world, nobody should expect a bug to be on the same power level as something like Fatalis. But the reason these two are able to reach these peaks of achievement and power are the same. It's not thanks to pure strength in either case, it's because of ingenuity. Your character in the game is only as strong as the tools they use. In other RPGs, you get stronger by pumping skill points into a strength stat, but here the only way to get stronger is to make better equipment. And the only way to do that is to successfully take down whatever it is you want to turn into a new tool. There's no stats you can exploit to let you artificially hit harder. As the challenge increases, you need to keep on improving your tools to keep up. Otherwise, you'll fail. It's the same as our ancient ancestors in real life too. No human could ever bring down something like a mammoth in a straight one-on-one. After we invented tools and tactics, however, that size difference didn't matter as much, and we got so good at hunting them that they don't exist anymore. Our ancestors didn't manage it by strength, they did it through ingenuity. It's the human way. And that exact type of ingenuity is how Ahtal-Ka earns its place as a final boss monster. Compared to others in this world, it's small and weak, so it uses tools to compensate. Throughout the fight, it'll haul up all sorts of different weapons from below the sands, including the iconic Dragonator used throughout the series. The peak of this thinking is in the Empress's throne. the giant mechanical dragon it pilots. Here, Ahtal-Ka isn't just using discarded human weapons, it's combined all sorts of useful bits and bobs to create something entirely new. Size does matter sometimes, and now Ahtal-Ka can go shoulder to shoulder with some of the other last boss monsters. It also reflects pretty badly on the state of human progress in this world. Armoured vehicles like tanks give a pretty obvious advantage in combat, and as many of Japan's media exports have taught us, it's entirely logical to scale up a tank to massive size if you need to fight massive foes. In the Monster Hunter world, it wouldn't be surprising if people eventually decided that sending one guy and a cat to fight God was a bad idea, and made some kind of big armoured tank machine to make the job a little bit easier. And yet, nobody has thought of this yet, apart from Ahtal-Ka. When it comes up from the sands the first time, you get this striking realization that you've really underestimated it. Having Ahtal-Ka be a bug is what makes us underestimate it in the first place, and therefore helps this moment have more of an impact. The way it uses tools to enhance its power is like holding up a mirror to how you play these games. And in a game all about celebrating and reflecting on the core tenets of the series, it's genius design. Generations doesn't have much in the way of plot, but by facing a reflection of yourself at the end like this, you get a sense of personal narrative conclusion. But the fight's not over yet. The machine is eventually brought down by our hunter, leading to a final phase where the difficulty really ramps up. Ahtal-Ka uses a new weapon at this point, a gigantic 8-spoked wheel it can fling around like the world's deadliest yo-yo. If there's ever a point you're going to fail the quest, it's most likely going to be now. But that's not really the impression you get from the music. In fact, it makes it feel like you've already won. This is the final stage of the final boss in the final game of a generation. So of course, this is a really triumphant moment, and the music lets you know that all that's needed is one final push for the day to be won. Normally, you'd leave the celebration until you've actually achieved whatever it is you want to celebrate, but the minute you see that wheel, you know it's pretty much over, because that isn't just any wheel. It looks a lot like the Wheel of Dharma, a Buddhist symbol that can represent the practices leading to the cycle of rebirth. And when this fight is over, that's exactly what's going to happen. Every Monster Hunter game starts off the same way, with you being a weak nobody struggling to move up the ranks and improve your hunting prowess. You're nothing more than a bug in the eyes of the monsters ruling the land, but in time, you're able to achieve more than you ever thought possible. Eventually, you'll end up bringing down the single biggest threat facing whatever village is hosting you, and then the game finishes. When a new one releases, you're back to square one again, and the cycle repeats. Only this time, the series itself underwent a rebirth too. After Generations came World, which brought significant changes and was the biggest step forward the series has ever taken. So this is a significant moment for the players, but also for all the developers who've worked on the series. Back when the first game released to middling reviews, I don't think any of them would have predicted that, one day, the series would release an entry that became Capcom's best-selling title ever. Gen Ultimate was released in Japan just 3 months before the announcement of Monster Hunter World at E3 2017. They knew what was coming, and if you played this last phase back then, you might have gotten the impression that something big was coming too. It creates this moment where both the players and the developers have an opportunity to celebrate the journey they've been on. So Ahtal-Ka trying to kill you with a symbol of rebirth is ironic, and reinforces the idea that you've already won. It's a last hurrah in a game all about giving 11 years of work a last hurrah, and serves as an ultimate conclusion to all of those experiences. Endings are intrinsically pretty sad moments. They mean that the thing we've been enjoying is now over, and while we can sometimes go back and experience it all again, it'll never be the same as that first time. But I think the mark of a great ending is one that can make you smile regardless of that. Having a moment to look back on it all and celebrate it is really special, and everything about Ahtal-Ka was designed to do just that. Maybe the title of this video is a bit hyperbolic. Maybe in 10 years there'll be another huge evolution in the series, if it's still around then, and there'll be a last boss that celebrates all 20 years instead of just 11. But it won't be the same as this moment in time. There will be another layer on top of this first generation. The first one I played, the one that got me hooked into spending God knows how many hours playing this series, will always be in the first generation. and there won't be another game like it ever again. So we might end up seeing another boss in the same style as Ahtal-Ka, but I really don't think there will ever be another one like it, at least not for me. And if you've experienced it, then maybe you think the same. And on that note, I'll wrap things up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.